Hi, everybody, and welcome to Specimens. My name is Elle, and I'm the host of this podcast. In this show, we talk about specimens and the roles of the conservationists, scientists, and stewards who work with them. At the very top of this episode, I'd just like to wish you all a very happy and healthy new year. I hope that you've all had a restful and restorative break, and wherever this finds you, you are safe and ready for 2022. In this episode, I am speaking with field ornithologist, founder of Bird Mentor and the For Love of Birds Festival, Kristi Dranginis. She's going to tell you all about the incredible festival that's actually being hosted at the end of January, and all the links and all the information that you will need to attend that festival are going to be in the show notes, but I'll also run through them at the end of the episode. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Kristi, and welcome back. Kristi, I am so thrilled to have you on the podcast to talk to me today. How are you doing and where are you?
Yeah, hey Elle, it's so good to talk to you today. I'm doing well today. I'm feeling a little just busy with life and things like that as people are. And today you're speaking to me from the eastern coast of Connecticut. Maybe not officially coast, but I live in Connecticut, and it's this beautiful, beautiful. If the folks that you have on your podcast maybe have never been to this part of the U.S., it's just a really lovely land, and we're home of maple syrup. If you've ever had maple syrup, this is where a lot of maple syrup is created. We have these beautiful maple trees that turn all sorts of different lovely colors in the fall, and lots of marshlands around here, and which brings, of course, mosquitoes and things like that in the summertime. But and then we also, like, as far as birds go, we have one bird that's, I think, really special. Some people find it to be a little, I don't know, irritating maybe sometimes, is the blue jay.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a beautiful bird, and the interesting thing about blue jays is that we have jays in the U.S. here, but they're different depending on where you are in the country. So here in the eastern part of the country, we have the blue jay, but then you go to the western part of the country, and there's scrub jays, Steller's jays, there's all sorts of opinion jays, and yeah. So I feel lucky to be here with the blue jays.
Oh, you've painted such a beautiful picture. It's funny because you said that the jay is a bird, maybe not the most popular and has a little bit of a bad reputation. It's fun. We have exactly the same thing here with the Eurasian jay, which is an absolutely beautiful bird and really sort of stands out for the flash of electric blue on its wing and just the really beautiful color of its back. It's kind of got like this maple color almost. It's kind of like cherry
Oh,
maple color on its back, and they look really beautiful against the English landscape. But they can be pests. We know they take eggs from nests, so it's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword when the bird is aesthetically really beautiful, but their personality and behavior is really bad.
yeah, well, it's funny, that's, I mean, I don't know, we can sort of like go on tangents and stuff like that, but I personally have a love for those that are, I guess, demonized in the
Mhm.
world,
Mhm.
especially the animals, for instance, because it's like everyone's got to eat, and that just happens to be the natural way that the jays eat. And I mean, how many humans love to have a scrambled egg in the morning?
Mm.
And so,
Very well
I
put.
mean, it is, and actually, like, there's so many animals that need to survive on bird eggs. And it's not just the jays and the other, we call them nest robbers over here, but it's just like skunks and squirrels and even deer. Deer will eat bird eggs, and rabbits will go for bird eggs. And so it's often like, I just find that fun to kind of dive into that a little bit, and help people see that sometimes we demonize these certain species, but then we forget that, like, around here anyway, I grew up with the movie Bambi, and everyone's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, Bambi and Thumper," and it's like, yeah, Bambi and Thumper eat bird eggs too.
And it's so important to teach, and we're going to come to this. I love that we've already got into a tangent before I've even given you my questions. But it's so important to teach everybody that the whole spectrum of wildlife is not just this one look at the world where everything is sunshine and rainbows. I mean, that's real life, and that's something that I feel in my own line of work. You're very much on the defense about wildlife for people who perhaps don't
Mm,
actually understand what nature really is. And nature can be brutal.
brutal. Yeah, brutal. And I think it can be hard. I can understand it can be hard for some people who come to loving nature, and nature is like this sort of holy and safe place for them.
Mm, mm,
And they want everything to be just that, like sort of, safe and lovely and beautiful. And then when they see these harsh things happen, I think in some people's mind, they make it wrong. It's just like, this shouldn't be
mm,
happening. I have to go save that
mm,
baby bird, or I have to. And of
mm,
course, it's our instinct to want to help the weak and, and all that. But at the same time, it's just like, yeah, I just, I don't know. I feel, yeah, I like what you're saying. I think it's important to remember the wholeness of nature and that there's a reason, like big old mama
mm.
nature had intention much larger than any that we possibly could have and could fully understand,
Yeah, yeah.
when she created all that she created. So I think that yeah, I just think it's good to maybe just take a step back and just consider the deeper
Mm.
why, and it's not to say like I don't run in and, again, like try to save a bird being attacked or something like that. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
also
yeah.
this is a cyclical nature, isn't it? Um,
It
we
is,
we
yeah.
did touch on where you're located at the moment, recording to me from, but is this where you've always grown up? Tell me a little bit about what your childhood was like. Were you very inspired by the natural world as a youngster?
That's a great question, Elle. Um, I have a funny story that I tell people sometimes. So in some ways, I would say yes. So I grew up on um, a 4,000-acre nature preserve, basically at the border of it. So the home I grew up on bordered this 4,000-acre nature preserve, which I don't know what that translates to in hectares for you all. But it just let's just know, I just say it's a lot of land. It's a lot of land, and so my backyard, in many senses, was just the wild. And my mom, when I was a kid, she worked from home, and so my sister and I, she used to kick us out of the house like in the early morning. And she'd be like, go outside and play. And so we would just be given sort of free reign to run in the woods. And my sister and I just created all these kind of like fantastical stories about the woods and who lived here and who lived there. And we had these special areas that like, oh, we can't go over there because that's where so and so lives. And like, I don't know. So we just kind of lived in our own little wonderland, out there in the
Yeah.
forest. And so in many ways, I do feel like the natural world was my teacher ever since I was young. However, as I started to get a little bit older, just like in middle school and high school, for me, I could care less about nature and I just cared about boys and shopping and clothes. And I remember I have this friend, his name at that time was Benji, and he now goes by Benjamin, but he currently works for the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And at
Ah.
that time, when we were in high school, I had study hall with Benji, and we would sit together in the library. And just about every day, he'd like hold this bird book in front of me, and he'd be like, "Kristi, what bird is this?" And I was like, "I don't know, Benji. It's a bird." And he was like, "I just showed it to you yesterday." And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't care." And so for me, it was like at that time in my life, I just cared about, I think, the things that all my peers were caring about, and not many of them
Mm,
cared much about nature. And so I think I took a big step
yeah.
away from it for a while. But um, honestly, for me, I think it officially began like my love for nature, or I should say my awareness of nature really began this one summer when I was in college, and I was volunteering on this island that was 14 miles off of Long Island Sound. And there was this longstanding research project that was funded by the American Museum of Natural History. And it was run by this amazing woman named Helen Hayes, who literally has been out there for like 40 years. I think she's like well into her 90s now, and she still goes out every summer
Oh.
and spends her whole summer out there studying the common and roseate terns. And so I was there with a college boyfriend. He's like, "I'm gonna go out on this island for the summer, for a couple of weeks this summer. Do you want to come?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." And so I joined him, and we were just told like, "You're just supposed to do whatever we need." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever. I'm a 20-year-old girl. I don't care. I'll just do whatever." And so we were there early in the season before many of the terns arrived. And so what they do is, the researchers who are out there, is they would catch and band migratory songbirds in these mist nets. That's what they called them. It's kind of like a badminton net, but like much finer
Mm,
netting. And as a volunteer, I wasn't allowed to handle the birds except when they got really busy. after banding, they'd ask us to carry the bird back out and release it after it had been banded. And so this one day, I was handed a bird. I was inside the banding station. They're like, Kristi, can you take this bird and go walk it outside? And so the guy kind of like put it in my hand, and I didn't really pay attention when he put it in my hand. I knew I had the bird in my hand, and but then like I was outside and I lifted my hand up, and I just was completely starstruck, Elle, because the bird didn't fly away at first. Some birds like will fly instantly. Other birds kind of take a moment to just really sort of get their bearings. And this bird just stayed in my hand for a moment. And I was just in awe because literally in my hand was the most elegant and gorgeous bird I had ever seen. And I don't know if you've heard of it before. I'm not sure if you all have them over here. It's called a cedar waxwing. And if
Mhm.
folks have never seen it, you should really look that bird up. It literally is like elegant is the best way to describe it. It's this gorgeous, elegant
Yeah.
bird. And from that moment, I was completely hooked. And I was like, I want to know more about birds. And I feel like for me though, then what happened was things like really started to get interesting because a few years later after college, I was working at this place called the Wolf Education and Research Center, which was located in Winchester, Idaho. It's this tiny, tiny little town in Idaho where there's literally like 200 people. There's like not much else out there. But we were charged with taking care of a pack of captive raised wolves where what we had to do every day was walk around this 20-acre enclosure to make sure that like the fence was still intact and also to help build rapport with the wolves because being someone who just came there, that's an important thing to do if you want to go in and work with them ever, is that you have to like they have to like you because they are
Mhm.
still wolves. And so this one day I was walking around the enclosure with the lead caretaker, and we had been talking about my newfound fear of mountain lions because up until that point in my life, as a girl, as I've said, like from this small town in Connecticut, I didn't even know that there was a difference between a mountain lion and a bobcat. And so, and I'm not sure what's the biggest cat that you all have over there, wildcat.
Oh gosh, wildcat. We don't really have very big wildcats, to be honest. They're mostly tabby domestic. We only have domestic cats
Okay,
here.
well, then we can go from there. So basically, like, take a tabby domestic cat, and then you want to, I don't know, add on about like 30 more pounds, and you've got like a bobcat, more or less. And then you add on maybe sometimes up to 100 more pounds, and you've like a large, like kind of like a Great Dane sized dog, and that's a mountain lion. And the
Mm.
caretaker had been he's an amazing storyteller, and so up he had been telling me these stories about how mountain lions kill their prey by severing their spinal cords. Like you never know that they're there because they basically like sever your spinal cord and you're dead. And so of course like I was terrified now. And so it turned out like the thing is that we discovered that we actually had an actual mountain lion on site who had recently chased the caretaker's cat up to the top of a Douglas fir tree. And so
Mm.
this was super freaky for me because not only were we living in these small they call them wall tents. They're kind of like tents that people will use when they go hunting and things like that. It's basically like a glorified camping tent. It's big. It can fit like a tiny little stove in there, but it's just made out of canvas. And so not only were we living in like these canvas wall tents, we also had to park our cars about 3/4 of a mile from where we lived so that we didn't disturb the wolves too much. So there were many days where like I had to walk by myself up this long forested gravel road. And I was convinced that I was just going to be the next meal for this mountain lion. I was just like, I'm going to get eaten. And so this day that we were walking around the perimeter of the enclosure, he looked at me and he was just like, well, Kristi, the birds will tell you if there's a mountain lion, right? And I was just like, the whole world just stopped. And I was like, two really important things happened for me in that moment. And the first was like, yeah, duh. Of course. Of course the birds need to know like when there's predators and danger around. And of course they're going to communicate about that. And then my next thought was like, why am I 20 and just hearing this for the first time? Like I should have learned this ever since I was a kid, like when I was playing alone with my sister in the woods, like and I didn't. And I made a promise to myself at that point, and I was like, I'm gonna learn as much as I can about what he was telling me was this thing called bird language, which is understanding the language of the
Mhm.
forest. And I'm going to make sure that as many people that I know will know about it so that they don't have to end up
Yeah.
in those situations, and that they also can just be really become aware of what's happening in the world around them, you know?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, there were so many things in that question. It's so idyllic. I mean, I was going to say, if you're not interested in birding or birds, the cedar waxwing is literally like a gateway bird
Mm.
because it is, you're so right. It's one of the most beautiful, smooth. I mean, it almost looks like something out of an oil painting. It doesn't even look real. So I'm not surprised that that was the thing that kind of really hooked you because that bird's beautiful. Um, oh my goodness, so many things. Okay, so given that you came to it a little bit later, you said you were 20,
Mm.
I presume academically you weren't fixed on a career in science in a very kind of linear, traditional fashion. What kind of happened next once you found this passion? How did you then run with it?
Yeah. So let's see. Um, I suppose for me, so what happened was, this guy who was the caretaker of
Mm,
the Wolf Center, he and I became, super close, and we both ended up working for that school that had started to teach him more about bird language. And
mm,
so I worked for a school called the Wilderness Awareness School that's based in Washington State, and so I for about 5 years I learned as much as I could about bird language, animal tracking, survival skills, and yeah, and then we were teaching the school. Basically what we focused on, the role I had, focused on teaching adults how to deeply connect to nature. um,
mm,
and and so, yeah, so for me, and the teacher that I learned from, his name is John Young, and he wrote the book What the Robin Knows. And John's teacher is a man named Tom Brown Jr., who some people will maybe recognize his name. Tom Brown wrote the book called The Tracker, and he has a school in New Jersey called the Tracker School. And a really interesting and I think pretty profound aspect of Tom's upbringing is that um, he was in many ways mentored, and I would say raised, but not technically. He was mentored by an Apache scout that he called
mm,
Stalking Wolf. He never revealed his true name, but he called him Stalking Wolf in his books. And so Stalking Wolf was this yeah, so he was this amazing man that then taught Tom and his own grandson, ever since they were 10 years old, about the ways of basically being a scout in nature. And so when Tom was in his like late teens, early 20s, he then found his first student, which was my teacher, John Young. And so
mm,
the lineage of the teachings that we learned back then, originated with this amazing man named Stalking Wolf. Um, and were shared kind of through that way. And so for me, you know I spent many years with them, and then I ended up honestly, so I was living in, which probably your readers are like, oh, suck it up, Kristi, because you all live in England, but maybe not everybody. But anyway, I was living in Washington State at the time, which is not too different from the climate in England. And it rains
mhm.
all the time and very dark and whatever. And that was very hard for me because I came from a place where we had the four seasons. It was bright and sunny in the winter. And so I just said to myself, I'm like, I need to find some sun. And so I moved to Colorado. And while I was
Mm,
there, I started leading bird walks. Um, and I would have folks come up to me and they would just be like, well, Kristi, like, how do you know what you know? And can we learn from you? And I was like, well,
aw.
no, at that time I was like, I don't know anything. I didn't have anything to like base it off of. I was around all these
Yeah.
people who were amazing instructors and knew so much. And I just didn't like I never had to compare myself to sort of the rest of the world. And then when I got out there and was sort of doing my own thing, I was like, wow, I guess I do know a few things, and maybe I have been learning a lot throughout the years. And
Mm,
and so I had enough people ask me about it, and I had my own like curiosity and love for birds, and I wanted to learn more. And you probably know this, Elle, like when you really want to learn something, like being a teacher is one of the best ways to do it because you're sort of forced, like you want to know more than your students, right? And so you're sort of forced to know more. And so yeah, so I developed this master's course, and yeah, it's Advanced Skills for Beginning Birders is the name of the master's course. It's an 8-month long program. And really for me, I've found it to be a very effective approach to not only learn how to identify birds in a really consistent manner, but it's also a way for folks to become more intimately connected to the birds around them, because throughout the course, there's activities for them to engage in and get connected to the outdoors and to nature on a really regular basis. And over time, if they do this, what happens is that there's like this really deep shift starts to take place within them. And then they begin to notice things in their environment and themselves that they really hadn't ever thought possible. And so this beautiful transformation starts to take place within people.
Yeah. And it brings people so much closer to the natural world in ways that they might have never imagined was available to them.
Exactly.
So it's so special, and it's why speaking with people like you, you said that your mentor was the gentleman who introduced you to birds, was a wonderful storyteller, that you yourself are a wonderful storyteller. So I have no
Yeah.
doubts that you get people incredibly impassioned. But just quickly, as a result of that master's course, is that the same as your bird mentor business, your company name? How did that come about? Is that connected, or is that something different?
Mm. It's actually the same thing. So Bird Mentor is the overarching company and or business, and then the master's course is one of the courses
Yeah.
that I offer within Bird Mentor. So I have the master's course. I have a 6-week bird song course. There's a bird feather identification course. I do this festival that we're about to put on, the For the Love of Birds festival. So there's many things that and then I do my own like bird walks and things like that. And so there's many things that I do, but Bird Mentor is like the all-encompassing sort of basket that holds it all, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. And what kind of people do you find come to your walks and your courses? Are they people coming to it slightly later? Are they people who are at the sort of forefront of their education and thinking about becoming an ornithologist or in some way involved in animal behavior? Who are the people that you're taking out?
Yeah, it does vary quite a bit. I find most folks are
Hmm.
retired. That's just sort of when I think a lot of people come to birds and loving birds is because they have time now to actually pay attention to the
Yeah.
natural world. They're not raising kids. They're not doing, all the things that you need to do when you're younger. And that to say, like I definitely have younger students, but the majority of folks I find are generally retired, and they come from all walks of life, Elle. They're really like all sorts of people that have just kind of had their own, they call them spark birds here in the US, or just those their own moments of sort of awakening and love for nature. And I think one thing that they find working with me, I'm a little bit of a different teacher, or bird walk leader than most people. So one thing I do is I don't always give people the answer,
Hmm.
um, because really, in truth, like I'm more committed to someone building a rich relationship to the birds around them than I am in them knowing the bird's name.
Hmm.
So like I'm more inclined to allow a mystery to linger for a student and let them discover the answer on their own, even if it might take a month or a year or whatever for them to discover it. And I know this might sound cruel at first, but here's the thing, like when we take a question really deep inside our being and when it permeates everything we do, when it's like so potent that it pulls us out of bed in the dark of a chilly fall morning to sneak out before dawn and see if we can learn where the ducks are sleeping, which is actually something that just happened to me a couple weeks ago. But what was beautiful about that moment was like, so there's this thing in me that I know is alive, right? I feel like the mystery is something that's a living entity in a sense. And by just finding the answer by Googling it or getting a quick response, like, oh, this is the answer to that question. So, like, what had happened was the night before the little moment I just described, I had gone out to our local boardwalk, which isn't too far away from here, with a friend, and it was dusk. It was really kind of getting dark, and we started to see, we waited until it was quite dark, and all of these ducks started to come in. And they were like groups of ducks, and it was getting darker and darker, but more ducks were coming, more ducks are coming. And, this time of year, it's not uncommon for us to see large numbers of ducks, but like at this one particular pond, like the numbers we were seeing, I'm like, that's a lot of ducks. And I was pretty sure they were all mallards, but I wasn't 100% certain. And so in my mind, I was like, I could have Googled something or just sort of like, I don't know, asked somebody a question about it and been like, anyone else see, or go to, like, we have a thing called
Mm.
eBird. You guys might use
Yeah.
eBird too, but um, I could have looked on eBird to see what other people had been seeing in the last couple of days. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to get up at dawn and get out there before the ducks leave, because it was my hunch that the ducks would leave the pond at, around dawn. And so I was like, I got to get out there before then. So I did. So I walked out there like first thing, first light. And in turn, like what I ended up discovering was there were hundreds of robins up in the trees just singing this, for me, unexpected dawn song, because this time of year you don't hear them
Mm.
singing as much in the dawn. And then I got to watch the sun rise above the horizon. There was this beautiful, like, pink hue off in the distance. And then a few moments later, like, the swans started to take off of the water and you could hear their wings. I don't know if you've ever
Mm.
heard like swans' wings as they fly by. It's kind of like this whirring sound. And it's so magical. And then like a few minutes after that, this family of otters were
Oh my
playing in the pond. And so I just feel like when we do things like that, we tap back into the heartbeat of the world again.
God.
And for me, it's magic and it's special and it's really what's natural. And, I never found out the answer that day. And then I had another question that came from that, which was like, well, where do the ducks sleep? Because I didn't see a single duck. Like when I went to the pond, I was like, there wasn't a single duck on that pond. And I thought, this is nuts because like they all came in after dark. I don't think that they left overnight, but like, I don't know. So I still have this mystery question, and I just love it. It keeps I feel like it brings, like, a vitality and life and something amazing back to
Mm.
our lives again, It's not just like, Google it and get the
Yeah.
answer, you know?
Well, isn't it amazing that we share the planet with something that we're still questioning and that it still leads so much undiscovered territory? Like you see a bird on your commute or whatever, you see them out the window, but we don't fully understand everything about them. And there's so many questions that are still left unanswered. It makes it more exciting. It makes it feel like new territory all the
It
time.
does, and I feel like what it does is, like I said, it taps us back into the heartbeat of the world because really it's like. And I think that's important because so often these days, it's really easy to get sucked into the news, into the
Mm.
dramas, into the terrible things, the hardships that are going on in the world. Because of course, that's like what the news media wants us to see is all the bad stuff, right? And it
Yeah.
can be hard to find ways to remember really what life is about and like really what is at the core of our beings as natural wild creatures. Like at the end of the day, that's what we are. We're like wild natural creatures, and we've just been removed from the wild through many generations. And there are ways that you can get back in touch with it, and there are ways that you can find that connection again. And it can be as simple as like waking up at dawn and getting out to a place where nobody else goes, because
Mm.
everyone else wants to stay in
Yeah.
bed.
Well, I don't know if you agree, but it's almost it feels very intimate. I think you used that word earlier, but nature and accessing nature in those times when the majority of society might, not see the importance of it, or they might still prefer to stay in bed. It gives you something really private and really intimate. And nowadays, everybody's searching for that missing thing in their life, but maybe that missing thing is literally just the difference between birds or birding, wildlife, nature, whatever, and not. It could be something as simple as that. It could be the remedy to so much that people just don't even realize they have the ability to make it part of their lives.
But isn't that always the case? I feel like the answers are often always the simplest. It's just we want to make them more complicated. And so,
Mm.
really, one of the things that we do during the festival actually is every morning we start off with a morning bird sit with everybody. So we do these live. I bring in this woman named Molly Songus, who's works for the California Audubon, and she leads people through a bird sit, which is basically just an opportunity to like sit still, observe nature, and we do it all as a group. So everyone, because we're not doing a live, the festival isn't live. It's a virtual festival, but everyone gets on Zoom, and it was the coolest thing last year, Elle. Like we had people from like all over the world actually on Zoom together, and at different times of day. Of course, for us it's morning,
Mm.
other people it might be night, and other people might be like really early morning. And we got out there, it was like snowing one day, and we were just like, whatever, I'm still going to be outside. And but it was just such a wonderful way to start our days. And I had so many of the participants write back and be like, honestly, that was like one of the most beautiful parts of my experience, was sitting together with people and then like listening to nature, even just for like 5 minutes, just to
Mm.
listen and slow down and reconnect. And I feel that's what, like, when you go and go to like a health practitioner or someone, a counselor of sorts, like often they're just telling you to find ways to meditate,
Mm,
relax, get back in touch with nature. And you're right. Like it literally is the answer. And really do think our separation and distance from nature and lack of intimacy, like you said, there's the intimacy with nature that I think that we are missing. And it's an essential part of our life. Like we have to be connected to nature, I think, in order to
mm.
be truly healthy and at peace.
And also to understand our own place as well and the ways in which we can then go forward to protect it because it's on us.
Yeah, it
Oh,
is on us.
well, Christy, you mentioned the festival a couple of times in passing, but I realized that I haven't given you a sort of formal opportunity to introduce it and the objective behind it, why you started it, when you started it, and just a little bit about the festival in its kind of whole entirety.
Oh yeah, sure. I'd love to talk about it. It's actually, it was a surprising thing. Um it started last year, honestly, from one of my students. She told me this thing. We were talking one day. I do these twice a month. I have live Zoom sessions with my master's students. And this one day, and now just remember, like, these students are people who have been studying for a while. They go out almost daily in nature. They're observing the birds all the time. So they start to develop this really deep connection with nature. And so this one day she said to me, she's like, well, Kristi, like, I'm not actually a birder. And I was like, what do you mean you're not a birder? And she's like, well, I don't have like a life list, and I don't really know a lot about birds, and I don't like da-da. And she was just like giving this explanation of this sort of image that a lot of people have of like what a birder is. And to me, I don't care, like whatever you call yourself, it doesn't matter. But what was more important was that she was subconsciously kind of capping her ability to learn because she didn't see a path forward. She was like, well,
Mm,
I'm not really going to go there because I'm not one of those people. I can't really, learn what they know. Like the birders are the people who are like, professional and whatever. And I just like that really struck me. And she's not the only one. I encounter this belief pattern all the time from people on my bird walks. And so really for me, it was, I wanted to do a couple things with the festival. I wanted to find a way to help people see that being a birder or someone who loves birds can take many shapes and can look many different ways. And I also wanted to blend these two loves of my life, this love of deep nature connection and this love of bird watching or bird loving, And so and I hadn't really done that very much in my life before, where I kind of publicly was like, hey, there's this deep nature connection thing and there's this bird thing, and I want you guys to meet, I kind of wanted to like
yeah.
bring those worlds together. And yeah, and so that for me was, I guess, one of the core aspects of the festival and like why I started it. And I think really it's designed for people who are bird lovers,
Mm.
not just like diehard bird nerds, though we do have some diehard bird nerd people there for folks. And I think because of that, like that's one thing I think that makes the festival pretty unique and special is that we are able to bring on speakers who aren't just like birders, like the traditional birders in the sense that
Mhm.
they are people from like an array of like backgrounds. And we have survivalists on there, and we have photographers, and we have all sorts of, like, this one gentleman who's a naturalist and guide in Yellowstone National Park, and he's also an animal he like mimics animals sounds and
Mhm.
things like that. And I don't know, it's just there's just so many interesting people I think that we can talk to who are all in some ways connected to birds, like they have some relationship with birds. But it helps us to I think bring a broader perspective and broader understanding of what it is to love birds.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something really interesting there that there is traditionally this profile of what a bird watcher should be
Mhm.
or what people think it might be, and therefore that immediately isolates them and they're disconnected to that because they might not look that way
Yeah.
or they might not have the same kit or gear or even the right clothing in their mind. But actually, the festival guests, they all have the common thread of being interested or liking or loving birds. But actually it's not everything. There are so many other aspects and disciplines that bring you into birding, bring you into an appreciation of birds. It's not just about having an expensive pair of binoculars, and going on these walks that perhaps you don't feel are, safe for you or the right place for you, or you can see yourself represented in. So I think it's really wonderful that you're able to show that the avian world is not just about the sort of the traditional stereotype that you might think of when you think of a birder, because I mean it's virtually 2022. Birding is changing so much, the face of birding is changing so much, and I think that's really wonderful that you have such a broad array of avian voices to really let people know you can be anyone and it is for everyone.
That's literally it. Yeah, what you just nailed it, I think. You can be anyone, it is for everyone, and I think that's a really important message to get out there. It's not just about, because for me, it's like not just about birding and like what is
Mm,
a birder, but it's just that like I want people to fall in love with nature and to fall back in love with
mm,
and develop that connection again. And I think when we limit ourselves with our beliefs of like, well, I'm not one of those people, so I can't really go to that place, it's
mm,
like, no, no, this is like our birthright. Every single one of us, if we are a human on this planet, we have the ability to connect with nature in a really deep way, and to know the world in like rich relationship, where we can
mm.
become familiar, like family, with those that are around us. And whether it's
Yeah.
trees and plants or birds, it doesn't really matter. But for me, it's, my thing is birds, so that's kind of how I relate to the world at the moment. But yeah, and the cool thing about that is that like, I feel like when you're a birder or a bird lover, you are someone that also is really interested in like other parts of life, because to
Mm,
know the birds, well, you have to know like, if you want to know like where they're nesting, you kind of have to know like, well, what kind of nesting materials do they use, and what kind of food do they need, and what are their needs in terms of water, and where do they sleep at night, and like, so you start to ask like all these other questions about the world, and
mm.
it's just endless, like it's just never ending, which is so fun.
Yeah. And it's really cool to be able to learn something about a bird or a tree or a plant and then be with other people
Yeah.
that perhaps don't have zero interest, or at least they think they have zero interest. And you say something quirky, something that perhaps is a little bit of a weird tip or trick.
Yeah.
And they just suddenly, you see their faces light up and go, oh, really? And then if you think about it, they might then pass that tidbit of information on to somebody else, and so the cycle continues. We talked about, the cyclical nature of the world. We're part of that. We're part of the storytelling, and it's our duty and responsibility to bring people into that.
That's I love that you brought that up, Elle, because I really do think it is at some point, I think in all of our lives, we have this choice of, do we want to, I guess, give back to mentor other people and whatever it is that we do or we find important. And I do think that, and one of my, it's actually John Young, the teacher I mentioned earlier,
Mm.
he has said an important thing that, he said that if it wasn't for Tom, like when he was young, every day Tom would call him every night and say, "What did you see? What did you like?" He would basically tell John to go to his sit spot every day, and then he'd ask him all these questions. And what John realized is that if Tom didn't take that interest in him, if Tom didn't ask him those questions that pushed him to want to know more and to go out again and the next day, then he probably wouldn't have done it. It's like me as that middle schooler or high schooler. When you're a young kid, you can sort of get swayed by culture really easily
Mm,
and sort of pulled into just what everybody else is doing, unless you have guides and mentors around to inspire you and to
mm,
show you that there's like, I don't know, other ways to listen and to think about things. And so I do think it is our duty and responsibility to look toward others. They don't have to necessarily be younger than us. Most of my
mm.
students are actually older than me. But it can just be that, like, we have a gift to share and that we can offer that to people. And I do think it's important to, yeah, to be someone that offers yourself to others.
So tell me, Christy, how people can join in with the event. What are the sort of ticket tiers? How can they get involved, and where can they register?
Oh yeah, sure thing. So it's really easy. You go to fortheloveofbirdsfestival.com, and that's where you can register for the event. The tickets we tried to make them really affordable. So they're $12 for a general admission ticket. And then we also have this amazing package that's a sort of a bonus kind of thing that you can get for $47. We have a VIP all access pass, and that gets you tons of stuff. Like, we have all the speaker interviews. You get full access for life of those. There's bonus interviews with the speakers. We have an amazing raffle we do. We have live Q&A sessions after the festival with some of those speakers. Well, they're going to come back and speak to us in person. So you actually get to ask them questions yourself. Because I don't always ask, it's like when you're giving an interview, Elle, or someone's like listening, and then all of a sudden it's just like the person listening is like, wait, I wanted Elle to ask this question instead. And so now it's like, well, this is your chance, so the VIP pass is pretty awesome. So you get to get all that stuff. And when they're registering, just one thing for people to know is that when you go to the website, the homepage tells you all about the general admission pass. And then you're like, great, I want to do this. So you just click, you register, and then it's on the next page that you actually see everything about the VIP pass, because we really felt it was important to give the VIP all access pass like its own page, because there's so much that comes with it. So we kind of, it's like one of those back end kind of things where you have to, in design, you're just like, all right, well, how are we going to do this? So some people don't know necessarily up front that there is a VIP pass, but just know that like it's coming, so just register for the festival, and then you'll get to see the VIP pass after that. And you can either accept or decline. It's really easy. If you don't want it, that's fine. Just grab the general admission pass. And even with just the general admission pass, there's like so much that you still get. Like the speaker interviews are amazing. We have 12 incredible speakers that are, like I said, from all over. Elle, you are one of them, which I'm like, I loved our interview. It was so amazing. We also have people like Jose Martinez Amoedo, who is a survivalist living in the Yukon, and he was the star of the History Channel's Alone show. And he tells this awesome story about how one day this nightjar once saved his life. And we also have this amazing man. I love him. His name is Dr. Pepper Trail. He was one of our favorite speakers from last year, so we brought him back on for this year. And he is America's senior forensic ornithologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Forensic Lab. And he's helped to uncover many cases, but one of them that he got to talk about was about the elusive hummingbird love charm trade. And so he's been with them for 20 years. And anyway, Pepper's an incredible, incredible human. And so we just have tons of awesome speakers. And so you can go to the website and check it out. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else about the festival that we want people to know about. Anything else you can think of, Elle?
I think you pretty much summarized it. I mean, there is so much available, but even on the general admission ticket, it's super affordable, and the amount of knowledge that you will have access to and the expertise is going to be super exciting. And hopefully with that, it will allow people to, revisit something that they might have fallen out of love with. So no, I think you pretty much covered it, Kristi.
Oh, you know what? I did think of one thing. One thing to remind people of is it's a virtual festival. So you don't have to come, obviously, in person. And it's taking place from January 26th, 27th, and 28th. And then our VIP event is happening the 29th and 30th. So we call it the VIP after party. So that takes place the 29th and 30th. But the general admission is a 3-day event. And we also have some live events during the general admission portion of it too. We have a Facebook group people can join. And it was like, the Facebook group was so active last year. It was so fun. And people were like, I don't know. It was really awesome to see the connections that people made. And I actually even got to meet, I taught at a festival, a live festival, because I love being at live festivals myself. And I was down there in Texas just a couple months ago. And a couple of the people who were at last year's festival were like, Kristi, I was at the festival. And I was like, oh my God. So yeah, so there's just like these nice connections that people can make and all that. So it's really sweet.
So the Love of Birds Festival, we've got that all out there. But what else is on your future, either for the festival, the growth of the festival, or other professional things that you hope for yourself?
It's a great question. Let's see. Well, after the festival's over, I usually take a little bit of a break, and then I dive right in, because then springtime happens. And so that's really honestly one of the favorite times for people to learn about birdsong. I don't think it's necessarily the best time to teach about birdsong, but honestly, I think the best time to learn birdsong is in the wintertime. But everyone, like, I've had people like, no, I don't want to do it. I want to learn it in the spring. It's like, all right, you're just making it harder for yourself. But anyway, sometimes you have to just do what the people ask for. So I teach my 6-week birdsong course in the spring. Forget, it starts in like March or something like that, I think. So that's an amazing, that class is also super fun, because we go through this whole process. It's like just a systematic approach to learning how to identify the sounds and calls that birds make, because that's really what I've found. I guess in developing my courses over the years, I always sort of look for like, what are the areas that people have number one, the greatest love and passion for, but number two, the biggest struggles, And I feel like bird song is, again, one of those things that people are like, oh, I can't do that. I'm just not
Yeah.
even going to try. And so I always force people on my bird walks. I'm like, can you hear that? What is that? What is, and so like I make people like listen, because I really think that everybody can, I mean, again, unless you have hearing impairments, which many people do, especially a lot of my bird walk people, because like I said, they're, as folks get older, we all sort of start to, some of our faculties and facilities start to decline a little bit. And but there are devices and ways to use technology these days to help us hear birds better. And yeah, so anyway, I love teaching about birdsong, because what it does is it gives people a lot of confidence at the end of the course. They have to wrestle and struggle with some things at the beginning, for sure, because as you know, I won't give them the answers right away. But when they overcome that, and it always happens, I would say 90% of the time, like, people get to this point in the course, like usually around week 4, and they're like, "Oh my God, Kristi, it's work." It's just like, I know. You just have to stick with it. And like, and then things really start to come together for people. And so it's one of the biggest joys in my life, is to see folks like who didn't believe they could do something actually start to, excel and find joy and find love in something, that they at one point thought was
Yeah.
impossible.
I'm so excited to see where the festival goes, how it goes this year, and then the growth of it going forward. I have no doubts it will be something that just grows exponentially, because it has all of the potential. And I'm so excited to be a part of it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I felt so excited and so lucky when we sort of discovered you or found you online. It was like, this woman is awesome. So yeah, and so the amazing thing for folks to know is that Elle is actually going to come back for one of our live Q&A sessions. And yeah, and your interview was just phenomenal. And so I feel like there definitely was way more I wanted to ask you about. So I'm just really excited for the Q&A session. And I know other people will want to ask you more questions. So and I think what was cool was that you definitely got, like, our conversation got a little edgy at times, So I think that's fun, It's like, well, I don't know how people are gonna take it.
I think when you're interviewing a taxidermist, there's always going to be an edge. Let's be honest. Kristi, it's been such a pleasure, and I'm so excited. Just before I let you go, would you be up for doing a little quick rapid fire?
Yeah, sure. I don't know what that means, but okay.
Okay. Question 1 is probably incredibly predictable. Your favorite bird?
Oh, right away, the chickadee, not mountain, but the black-capped chickadee here in the US. Yeah. It's actually on the bird on my logo for Bird Mentor, not for actually, I think it is even the one, slightly different color, that we used, but, yeah, on my logo for Bird Mentor is the chickadee, because there's a sweet story with that. Mhm.
Is that because of everything that it represents, or is it because of the bird song, or is it what is the reason? Sorry, this is not one of the questions. I just want to know more.
The reason was actually, like, after that summer in college where I was studying the terns and I fell in love with the cedar waxwing, I, was actually on the college campus, and I heard
Mm, yeah.
and at that time I didn't know what it was, but all of a sudden I just got mesmerized, and I'm like, "What is that?" And so I start
Yeah.
looking up in the tree, and then I start making the call, and the bird's making the call, and I'm making the call, and, like, we're having this conversation, and all of a sudden there's literally, I didn't even notice it, Elle, but there was a car that was like 6 inches away from me, and it was like honking its horn at me, because I was in like this big parking lot, and it was like and I was like in the middle of the road. I was like, I was just in awe and in love with this bird. And so I think it was that, like, my little troubadour, he's just like this
Yeah.
moment of me falling. Like, that was where I think the cedar waxwing was like the moment of awareness. And for me, the chickadee was like the fall in love moment. It was like,
Mhm.
oh, I love
Yeah.
you.
Oh, it's so cute. Okay, right. Then this is one of the questions. What is your favorite place on Earth?
Wow.
It doesn't have to be like a geographical location. It can be something very specific, a certain place.
Hmm. Yeah, I do actually know. Well, there's sort of two, but like one is that boardwalk I was talking about. Like, I go down there
Yeah.
all the time. I go for runs, I go for walks, I go to sit. If I'm having a hard time in life, I'll go down there. If, whatever it is, I feel like for me, that's like the core of this land here. It's sort of, again, like the heart of this land is that the
Mm.
water and the marsh that's around that land and all the creatures that it supports and sustains. And so there's just such a like a life force on that in that boardwalk, and not the boardwalk itself, but
Mm.
the water that's there, and the creatures that are there, and the trees that are there, and so that's honestly one of my favorite places to go. And then one place in Africa where I just yeah, had some really amazing time in my life. So this little place in Africa is another one of those.
Amazing. Ugh. Okay. What is the most important lesson that nature has taught you?
Hmm. I think it's love, really. Honestly, I do. I think it's love. I think it's sort of like love for this, like for yourself, love for others, love for the earth. Um, there's like a stillness that I often find, like when I'm not still within, I go out into
Mm.
nature, I go for a run, or I do something, and I do a bird sit, and all of a sudden, like I come back and I'm still again, and I remember the thing I loved, or like that big picture. And really, to me, the ultimate big picture in life is love, and
Mm.
that connection that brings us really all together.
Yeah.
And so, and I think when I when I have like the most rich and deep experiences, like the ones that I probably would never
Mm.
talk about on a podcast, it feels like there's always this, like, I guess just this like magnificent force and sense of love.
I completely agree with that answer. I think it's like we said, it's one of the greatest remedies. This is my final question to you, Kristi, and I promise I'll let you go. What is your favorite quality in yourself?
Oh, now we're getting personal. Favorite quality in myself. I think it's my sarcasm, honestly. Which can get me in trouble at times, but like I think I can be kind of snarky and a little, yeah, just like sarcastic. I don't take things. I do take things seriously in some regard of my life, but I think like overall, I just have this ability to like I don't know, I guess be a little feisty and playful, and I think that's it's a quality that I enjoy in myself and I enjoy in others. But I think it's something that I've heard from my close friends and others who are just like, I think they feel a level of like safety and playfulness because it's like
Yeah.
sort of my ridiculousness and playfulness allows them to kind of open up that part of
Mm.
themselves. So
Yeah.
it always makes me happy, I think, to have some aspect of myself bring joy and like just joy for into other people. So
Yeah.
I think that would be one of them.
Well, Kristi, you've given me 60 minutes of joy, and I'm sure many listeners will be agreeing with me. And I cannot wait for you to bring so much more joy into people's lives in just a few weeks at the festival. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on my podcast. Thank you so much for speaking to me, and I'll speak to you in a few weeks.
That sounds great, Elle. Thank you so much for letting me be here. And thank you to everybody who's listening. I hope you come and join us at the festival this year.
So there you have it, my very first episode of 2022 with field ornithologist and impassioned bird enthusiast and mentor, Kristi Dranginis. That was such a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did. If you would like to find Kristi, you can find her on Instagram. Her handle is @birdmentor. And now I'd like to tell you a little bit about the festival. So the festival is $12, as Kristi has already mentioned, and you can find all of the information at fortheloveofbirdsfestival.com. I've popped the link in the show notes. It's in my Instagram bio. I really hope you'll join us for the live Q&A where you can ask questions directly and just come and listen to the incredible wealth of expertise and the love of birds that's bringing us all together. So I hope to see you there, and take care.